Motion by Schoonmaker, second by Frazier. I also have in my notes that has your old license been turned in?
I think so. We applied for another one a couple of months ago. I think our assistant general manager came for that one. That was we did under the wrong name. We ended up restructuring and we're not pursuing that one. So once we get, I don't have the current one in hand, but yes, we'll be switching it out for this one.
All right, we will need that, and also the certificate of registration and business license.
Mm-hmm.
All that will need to be turned in.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We have a proper motion and second on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to our next item, which is a discussion item on the suspension for the following establishment.
El Tequila, Bar and Grill, 702 Manorville Pike.
Just as way of a review,
Yes, Andrew Beamer here for El Taqueria.
thank you. They came last month and asked for another 30 days. This is a discussion and decision on any action that may or may not be taken toward them as far as their beer license goes. So, Mr. Moyers?
Do we have any updates from the Sheriff's Department on this matter? Yes, sir. Come to the podium and tell us what you found out. I think you were going to look into how many calls for service there have been in the past and whether there's been any problems in the last 30 days.
Yes, sir. Going back to January 1st of 2022 to today's date, there's been 44 calls for service. 13 of those calls were criminal complaints. One was a theft, 3 unwanted sexual contact, 1 rape of a 16-year-old. That was made December 19th of 2022. 1 mass fight, which is when we had to send our entire shift. 3 other fight calls were in October. 2 911 open mic calls with a woman screaming in the background. 1 reckless driving in the parking lot where they were spinning their tires and gunfire. And then 1 ag assault with 2 victims with a gun. There's been 17 loud music calls with 6 repeat calls on top of that. 7 fire calls where fire department went out on our fire alarm, and 1 fire marshal complaint having too many people in the bar.
All right. We suspended their beer license in December. Have there been any calls for service it was January, I'm sorry. January. Have there been any calls for service between then and now?
Just the loud music calls.
Okay. Loud music.
Loud music.
All right, Mr. Beamer.
Well, first off, I'd like to point out that my clients haven't been charged with anything. These are events that are happening around the establishment. They cannot control completely the area that they are in. And secondarily, as stated to this board, there's been no calls since January, I guess, except for loud music. And at that point, they've still had their liquor license, so it's not as if that people have not been able to inebriate themselves. So, and also as this board had heard, the new security had been instituted in October. As far as I can see, though, there's no criminal complaints against my clients on any of these behaviors, including underage selling or anything like that, for which I know this board, is very interested in and takes very seriously. So at this point, I believe they're doing the remedial acts that they can do. They are attempting to do the security measures that they know to keep the area clean. But as far as to the surrounding area that their restaurant is in, they cannot control the criminal acts of other people. And nor do I think that anyone can expect a third party to control the criminal acts of other people in the area.
Anything else?
No, that would be it.
Mr. Moyers, would you care to read us the statute that connects directly with the authority of the beer board?
Okay. Well, in this particular case, this is under Section 4-8 of the County Code. G, I think is the most appropriate section. It says that revocation, suspension, or imposition of a civil penalty may be made for any violation of any provision of this article or chapter, or whenever it shall satisfactorily appear that the premises of any person, firm, or corporation holding a permit under this article are being maintained and operated in such manner as to be detrimental to the public health, safety, or morals. The board, in considering the suspension or revocation of a permit, shall consider repeated violations of any ordinance or state law involving prohibited sexual contact on the premises of an adult-oriented establishment. That last sentence doesn't really apply here. So, if the board finds that the premises are being operated in a manner that is detrimental to the public health, safety, or morals, you may revoke, suspend, or impose a civil fine. Because this is not a question of sales to minors, you are limited under the ordinance to a $1,000 civil fine. So your choices are revocation and suspension, and they've been suspended for approximately 30 days now already, or the imposition of a civil fine of $1,000.
Thank you. Before I turn this over to Commission 7, we have some questions. Mr. Daly, Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said that your clients are not responsible for what's going on outside the establishment.
That's correct.
But since 30 days, there's been no problems except for loud music.
Yes,
So that leads me to think that you are the problem. Because if not selling the alcohol, the problem's gone away except for some loud music. The minimum I would do is give you another 30 to 60 days and let the sheriff's office see that you are doing right.
I think the issue, though, is that they are still selling alcohol. They're selling liquor. The fact is, most of these complaints are date to pre-October, and there was no doubt that there were acts that occurred near or on the premises, but this is a busy thoroughfare. And further, as far as to 911 calls, there is absolutely nothing they can do about. We don't know if those numbers are coming from the same call or anything like that. So there's nothing we can do about someone calling 911. I could call 911 right now on an establishment, and you could then say, hey, he called 911 on that establishment. The fact is, this is a business that's trying to operate. Not selling beer is a major problem for them that, effectively, if this commission wants to put them out of business, they could do that. But they are trying to do what they're trying to oblige you all. They're trying to do what they can. And they're willing to pay a civil fine. And like I said, they've hired new security. They are attempting to do different things. But some of these things they cannot control.
This is the business beside the Advanced Auto or the AutoZone. Is that correct?
Ace Hardware.
Yeah. At the Ace Hardware, that one there?
Yes.
So everybody's closed at 11 o'clock, midnight, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, except for your business. And that's when a lot of the calls are coming in. So you're drawing them there. So there's a draw there for them to come. They ain't coming to Ace Hardware at midnight, and they're not coming to Dollar General at midnight because they're not open. The only one open is your clients.
I understand.
Other discussion? Commissioner Schoonmaker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lieutenant Walker, do they have a dedicated parking lot, or is it part of a strip center?
It's part of the strip center.
Okay, but they're on the end of the strip center. Is that it right there? They're in the middle. Oh, and they're in the middle. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Moyers. What is the definition of premises?
Well, it's the area that's under the control of the beer licensee. Okay? So inside the establishment clearly is control of the premises. What happens in the parking lot kind of depends, and whether they have any dominion over the parking lot kind of depends on what the relationship is with the mall. Normally, it's a shared parking lot amongst several businesses. So I'd be surprised to find that they had any real legal control over what happens in the parking lot. So, it becomes difficult if we haven't gotten them for over-serving anybody, we haven't gotten them for selling to minors, then it becomes problematic to say that we're going to punish them for what happens in the parking lot that they have no control over. I'm assuming that they have no control over the parking lot. Now, anything that happens inside the store, inside the restaurant, they're fully responsible for. So you get in this gray area of people going into a restaurant, maybe having too much or whatever, and they go out in the parking lot where these folks can't do much except run them off, maybe not even that, because they don't have any control over it, and things happen out in the parking lot. So it's a difficult circumstance for a licensee.
Commissioner Jay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Moyers, but I think the conversation is really about, is this a public nuisance in a greater sense? If I held a music festival for 4 days and had a beer permit, and there were 37 DUI calls or DUI stops by the sheriff's office after my music festival, even if they didn't have any violations on the premise, clearly those are as a result of my event. So obviously that's a hypothetical, but if I came back the next year for another beer permit and the sheriff's office said, hey, by the way, because of after last year's festival there were 37 permits, you would have a serious consideration of whether you would issue them another beer permit. It would show sort of causation of you're not really, controlling, or you're creating something that is causing a larger public nuisance. And I think this is what we're getting at is we issue beer permits all the time. And yes, we have violations all the time of somebody didn't check a license. You guys have heard those. Somebody made a mistake, or somebody was intentionally selling to underage minors, and we give civil penalties. But this is a much more elevated discussion because it's an atmosphere that has elevated to riots, or potential riots, to fights, to sexual assaults, to men. So there's clearly a causation between the type of business you're running, the clientele that you have coming there, the amount of alcohol that you're serving, the hours, and then essentially the public disturbance and the potential impact on that community. And so you can't just say, well, what's in the walls or within the walls. Otherwise, we would never, we would be stuck in such a box. So I think that's what we're trying to consider is, are you trying to run a business that is responsible, and do you value the permit that we're offering, that we hold? I mean, this is a privilege. It's not a right, and it's a privilege to have a beer permit and to operate in a safe manner. And I'll tell you, this board puts a lot of stock in our law enforcement officials who don't want to spend their time, all over the county dealing with fights outside the bar. And so I guess I would ask the sheriff's office, you guys do this all the time, all over town. Do you feel like this operation is a public nuisance above and beyond the normal service of alcohol in a bar and a restaurant that we authorize all the time?
Sir, you're kind of asking.
You got to get right in the mic, sorry.
You're asking for a personal opinion.
Well, I'm asking for a professional opinion.
Yes.
This is what you do.
I would point out that since October, they had the 3 unwanted sexual contacts, the rape of a 16-year-old complaint, the mass fight that emptied out our entire night shift. I had to come and deal with it, and then 3 individual fight calls. That's all been since October, and then 9. There was 9 total loud music calls since October, today's date. As far as a nuisance and a draw on our manpower, because we are short on patrol, this would be a nuisance and a draw on our manpower, based on the facts that I have.
And nobody wants to put anyone out of business. We believe in free market and commerce, but we also have an obligation for public safety, and we have an obligation for the community in which you operate in. And based on everything I've read, I'm a bit in agreement with Commissioner Daly in that I wouldn't mind seeing another 30-day window in which you operate the business. Loud music is one thing, but if it seems to be tapering off and you're doing things to help prevent future business, then I think you need to prove it a little bit further, in my opinion, instead of just go back to opening up the floodgates.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lieutenant, the calls of the complaints, were those coming from inside of the establishment or outside the establishment, or do you know? I mean, we have several here.
Yeah, the loud music are coming from the community, around the community. They're not inside the bar. They're the residents from outside the area of the bar. That apparently the music's so loud that they can't sleep, given the hours. The fight calls were started inside and were escorted out into the parking lot. That's when our officers came in contact. The mass fight started inside the bar, spilled out into the parking lot. That's when our officers came into contact. The unwanted sexual contact where the guy was groping women, that happened inside the bar. And I have limited details about the 16-year-old. All I can tell you is, because the report is classified, and I can't look at it. I'm not the detective working the case. All I can tell you is she claimed it was inside the bar. That's all I can get off the 911 report.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I would just like to add that, interestingly enough, there's no DUI cause or any evidence of over-serving, which would be also a crime. Just as an aside to that, as far as to anything with the juvenile, we are not aware, nor have we been served or in any way made parties to anything in juvenile court. So I wouldn't begin to know whether be, being that that's a closed proceeding, I wouldn't know anything else.
I mean, I've got to say, I'm deeply disturbed by the activity that's going on in or around this establishment, especially when you get into unwanted sexual assault and rape. Those are very serious. And I know that you probably have a side to that story as well, but I tend to agree with my colleagues that this is a much bigger issue. And I truly feel like whatever you're doing is causing a danger to the general public, to your patrons, and quite frankly to our officers and our other citizens, because on more than one occasion, this establishment tied up officers where they could not respond to other people in your community.
Would you like to respond? Would anyone like to respond to that?
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. My name is Aurora. None of the issues that had been told about these cases, we were not aware of any of that, because never any of the police officers in the area came to us to let us know what was going on or what the people were saying about our business. So if we knew anything about this, we would have do something, because obviously, like you say, this is something that you cannot keep up with. I mean, I'm not going to keep up with a place that is going to be disrespectful to either the community, the city, or the state where I'm at. And I am very happy to inform you that we have enough people to work inside the building, trying to keep everybody comfortable and happy. Like, nobody has never complained inside the building. I've been there several times. Nobody has never come to me, told me that my business is doing something wrong.
So you're telling me that you have no knowledge, you had no knowledge of these things occurring?
No, because nobody came to me or to the other owner to tell us that this was going on in our property. Nobody came to tell us that the police had something against us, because we were not aware of what was going on. If the police officers knew what was going on, they could have come to us and told us what our business was doing. We could have done something. And they never to that. They never let us know anything. So, and I personally, like, one time outside of the building, I saw the police. They came, they just stopped by, they say hi, we offered them food. We were very friendly to them, and they were very friendly to us. They never said anything bad about our business, never. So that's why I'm so confused, because there are so many things that he's been saying in here, and I'm not saying they're not true. I'm just saying we were never aware of any of these things, never. Nobody had never come to us to give us a report of what the police had about us.
Lieutenant, is that common practice, that you all respond and then you don't communicate with the establishment's owners?
The loud music calls we do contact the owners and have them to turn it down. And by all the reports that there was a complaint, the officers responded, turned it down. There was only 6 repeat calls of the 23. Only 6 had to go back twice to tell them to turn down the music. As far as the fights, whether or not the officers went and talked to the owner or not, they were probably dealing with the fight. The security was the one that was tossing them out of the bar, so they had to have known that. As far as the 3 unlawful touchings or sexual contact, the guy was basically groping the women inside the bar, and there were 3 reports made. So the officers had to respond and take the complaint there at the bar. The one fight involved the head of security. The guy actually attacked him in the bar. So, I mean, they had to have known that. He was the one that made the complaint. So, I mean, the police officially reporting it and them knowing about it, I'm finding that a little difficult to believe.
Thank you both.
Now, the rape of the 16-year-old, I could see where they might not know about that one because it's a 16-year-old and we don't advertise that fact.
And I will recognize you, Commissioner Oster. Was that 16-year-old on the premises?
She claims it was on premises. Yes, ma'am. That's all I can get off the 911 report. I do not have access to the official report.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Oster?
Okay, I think that there's probably a glaring problem here that if we have a 16-year-old in the bar, did you let them know that there was a 16-year-old in the bar that has claimed to be raped?
I did not do that.
Okay. So we don't know if that 16-year-old was inside the premise. We don't know if she had been served alcohol. We don't know anything, and they don't know anything.
I do not know if she was served alcohol. I know she claimed that it happened on the premise.
Okay.
When the call came in, I know officers responded. They did a police report. A sex crimes investigator was assigned based off the 911 report, and that's as much as I have.
Would that not be, I mean, even though she's 16, you're obviously not going to say anything about her name or identity, but
No,
would
ma'am.
that not be something that the owners of that bar needs to know, that a 16-year-old was attacked in their bar?
I'm assuming that the investigator would have gone out and interviewed somebody.
But they're
That's-
saying nobody's ever said anything about a
I
16-year-old being
have no
raped.
confirmation of that one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I kind of agree with Commissioner Daley and Commissioner Jay of maybe doing another 30 days. I am happy to see that you guys have kept it in check as far as just loud music, that there's not been any other calls for fights and stuff. But I also agree with Commissioner Frazier that we are short-staffed, and if there was a horrible situation that happened in Knox County, our officers don't need to be tied up to dealing with the same thing over and over and over with the same business. So that's the issue that I've got. But
Briefly, Commissioner Schoonmaker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Law Director, are we restricted to a 30-day suspension, or could we make it a 60-day suspension?
You have the leeway to make it 60 if you wish.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I am sure, Commissioner Lee, that you have plenty to say about this being in your district, so the floor is yours.
I have concerns on Investigator Walker. You said you're not sure if the owners were notified about these sexual allegations?
No, ma'am. I just found out about it today when I pulled the 911 report for the.
Okay, so you just found out about it today?
Yes, ma'am.
And their testimony is they didn't know anything about it.
I would not find that hard to believe that the investigators, because it is a 16-year-old, they would not advertise the fact. They would probably do the forensics on the child first, and then wait for the lab to come back one way or the other, and that could take several months.
Okay, so you found out about it today. Do you know what the status is? Is that a full investigation going on with that, or is that just allegations at this point, or are there charges being?
I can only tell you, ma'am, based on the report, and I have it here, you're more than welcome to read it, that a complaint was made, officers responded, they did a police report, and a sex crimes investigator was assigned, and he did a report. That's all that's logged in a 911 system.
I just have some concerns that nobody knows about this, including the owner, if this had happened, why there wasn't questions asked to the owner. So I have a hard time, I'm not doubting that this happened, but for them to be able to come in here, they're entitled to due process.
I
They
agree.
didn't know about these sex crimes, and I don't believe we heard this before either, and you said you just found out today.
Yes, ma'am, when I pulled the 911 reports.
Yeah, I have some issues with that we're going to penalize them for that when we don't know more about that. That's really my biggest comment about that we, on the sex crimes, we're just, if the owner doesn't know, we don't know what's going on. At this point, we don't know if these are just false allegations or what
That
the
is correct, ma'am.
Yeah, okay.
Commissioner Lee, do you have a motion to make in regard to this situation?
I would personally would think there should be some further, the 30 days, I think Commissioner Larson said at least 30 days just to see how, 30 to 60 days to see how the continued behavior plays out so that we not only don't shut them down, but they know that they're on their last leg. So I'd make a motion for a 30-day suspend, 60 day.
Your motion
Is that in addition to what they already have been under?
Thank you.
Yes.
Or is that included? Okay.
In addition.
All right, so to be clear, your motion is that you would like to extend the suspension of beer sales for another 60 days.
Yes, that's my motion.
All right. Do I see a second on that? Second by Commissioner Daly. Is there any discussion? Is there any further discussion on this?
We can't hear you.
Hear you.
I'm sorry.
I mean, you're gonna have to like eat the microphone. It's so hard.
I'm sorry. Is this better? All right. We have a motion from the district commissioner that the suspension of beer sales will continue for another 60 days. And at that point, they will return to report to us. I'm at that part. Is that
That's my motion.
agreeable? All right. And we had a second on this from Commissioner Daly. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Frazier.
I would just like to ask the sheriff's office to get with the owners of this establishment and go over all of the complaints, any 911 calls that you've received in or around this establishment, and just talk things through with them and make them aware of what's going on, please.
I can do that.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll see you back in 60 days.
What date would that be? Sorry, I don't think I. What date is that? In April, I presume.
Yes, the April 24th.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on a second. We may be doing it.
Oh, you're right.
I stand corrected. That would be April 17th at 4 o'clock.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other business to come before this board? Seeing none, we are adjourned.